Mungu ya mapua.
I'm telling you, that word is forever with us. Okay, so welcome the people on this side of the oceans and welcome the people back home. I hope you're well. Today, our discussion is on enmeshment, and we get two very good friends, Joanne and the two J's, Joanne and Jacinta, talking to us about it. And as usual, we will start with Saya's opening speech, and then we will tutaendelea. Karibu, Saya.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Saya Jackson. I am a transitions coach. I recently realized what I do is I help people build new maps for their new worlds. I'll begin with two stories. In science, we call them vignettes when you're doing questionnaires. So one is what has come to be known as honor killings. It is dominant in cultures where the honor of the family is held at such a premium that anyone violating that honor code or doing something that is seen to violate the honor is seen as open game, and killing such a person in those settings is not deemed to be illegal or wrong or shameful. It's in fact seen as a thing of honor. One of the cases that stands out is one where a family, two brothers, killed their sister. Reason being, she was conducting herself in a manner that was bringing shame to the family, only just to understand that she wanted to explore a bit more freedom and date in a way that the brothers and the wider family did not respect. In fact, so ghastly was the story that the entire family was in on the plot, and the girl was killed, the accident was faked, the car was pushed into the river, and they all shared the same story, of course, until when things began unraveling. And to the last minute, even when they were found guilty, the family still held them as honorable. Put that, vignette number one. Vignette number two, or story number two, is there is a practice, and this is something I know true in Kenya. I don't know much about other places, where certain communities are keen on where they marry, where their daughters marry, where their sons marry. And they do basically auditions. And in one such story, a girl, very famous, was bypassing probable suitors back on the continent and was eventually forced into marrying somebody else from the United States because it would meet the family's name, it would help everything. For every look and intention, outsiders looking into that marriage and outsiders looking into the situation in their family would tick everything about that family as looking good. But sadly, as the marriage that was auditioned, she was auditioned into, began unfolding, we not only got a enhanced sense of the reality of that marriage, but also of the bigger reality of the family they were coming from. I remember talking once to a friend who was considering marrying into a certain union, and he had a certain sense of hesitancy. And in his words, he said, marrying that girl, I'm not too sure if I'm marrying the lady, or if I'm marrying the wider family, or if I'm marrying into a name. The disrespect of the boundaries was so big and so heavy that this gentleman was experiencing pushback. He couldn't place his finger on where the problem was, but he felt everybody was in anybody's space. And we as outsiders looking in felt like it looked like one happy family, but he, as one who had ever increasingly approached closer and nearer, felt there was a problem here. There was no seeming respect of boundaries. And on coming even closer, he felt and realized that, wait a minute, the name of the family was going to be big, and every other thing, including personal freedom, individual ideation, the respect of the individual families, was willingly sacrificed at this big altar of the name of the family. In the African culture, we had something very interesting. Marriage was never contracted between two individuals per se. It was never X marrying Y. Marriage was really a contract between families. But even after the families had entered into the contract of marriage, the conduct of family life was the preserve of the two individuals. What this additional layer of family was intended to do, and which was cemented in rigorous rights like the bride price, the negotiation back and forth, the visitation to the prospective home of the bride and the groom, the background search, all of those things were meant to cement the seriousness of this thing. But once a marriage transaction happened and the union had been formed, every individual was meant to have mastery over their own home. However, what was required of them is that they had cohesion with the rest of the community. The whole back and forth in the African setting ensured that if I then began mistreating my wife, that there was a place for her to go and get recourse. But in the truest sense of it, it was not meant to dictate when I dug my land or what my wife served me for dinner or where my children did this X or the other Y. Africa had a very interesting tango, a very interesting balance between the cohesion of the wider community and the rights of the individual. What's true about the vignettes we've shared today and the contrast to the African setting is a concept we call enmeshment, where there is a challenge, individuals forming and breaking off to become individuals versus them being placed within spaces where boundaries are so misrepresented and violated. And the end result is, in the extreme cases I have given, is divorce and death. But in less extreme, but nonetheless equally tragic cases, is people living lives that are suboptimal because the individual is subsumed in the mastery or the bigger name of, say, the family or the community that they are meant to represent. It affects all genders, but seems to disproportionately affect boys a bit more than it does girls. And therefore, at the end of the day, we have what we call in modern days the Kababa generation, where boys, in many cases, being raised by mothers, single or widowed for whichever reason, are ending up becoming surrogates of their mothers. And this Kababa generation seem to be cared for everything from whisker to tail as though they were a cat. And the end result is we're having a pandemic of men who are unable to cope, men who are therefore resorting to medicate their problems or their inability to cope, or at times just taking the route to end their life altogether. So why am I sharing all this? Is it to scare you into listening? No, it's to be able to jolt you into caring, and more importantly, to reflect. Are you enmeshed? Are you enmeshing others? Or more importantly, are we putting the environment that presents enmeshment? How can we go back to that African ideal for marrying into families, but living out as an individual? Back to you in studio.
Thank you. I think I'll be having a notepad when Sarah speaks so that I take some notes sometimes. Okay, so let's go to definition. I think we'll start with Jacinta. What is enmeshment?
Hey everyone, happy Sunday, and thank you for having me over for this very important conversation. So an enmeshment is really a complex web of intertwined and relationships that are very blurred, extreme lack of boundaries between parties, and identities are intertwined with each other, and it becomes really difficult for the parties in it to have boundaries between each other or amongst themselves. And you see this in family settings. And as Saya said, we tend to see this with boys who are highly enmeshed with their mothers. I have seen father-daughter enmeshment, which is a whole other conversation. And we also see mother-daughter enmeshments. There is an extreme lack of boundaries. There's no difference between where one person ends and the other one begins. What's yours is mine. You're not entitled to your own emotions, your own autonomy, your own setting. You're not allowed to set boundaries. So it also creates excessive dependency, where one person, the enmeshed party in this case, is obligated to the other party on all levels. And from outside, when you look at two people who are enmeshed and you're an outsider, it can look like two people who are very close. But once you get, let's say you marry into the family, you're like, what did I just get myself into? So let's say a mother-son enmeshment. When you're dating or when you just meet the person, they look like they're really close, mom and son. But as you get to know them, you realize this person actually comes with as a package with his mother. Same thing with a girl who is enmeshed with their mom. And it's an entanglement that is so hard to break. The two people who are in it are not really aware of the dysfunction that is existing. And the child who is enmeshed with their parent, like a mom, constantly feels obligatory guilt and loyalty to the parent. I'm just using parent mom-son dynamic here. So they feel like they are obligated to their mom at all levels. So you, as a person who either is dating them, has married them, you will always feel like you come in second. Now, when with an enmeshment, it starts with using our children as emotional cushion. Saya mentioned, let's say the mother is a single parent or widowed, or they're in a marriage that is they're not getting fulfilled. Their emotional needs are not being met within that union. So she may take the boy child, often the one with a lot of empathy, and uses that child as the emotional cushion, and ultimately the son starts playing the role of surrogate husband. So this surrogate husband also becomes the golden child, and as an adult, it becomes very hard for him to separate himself from that, or he really also doesn't want to lose that golden child status. So when you meet them and you marry them, you will always be second. You, in the dating world, when you meet them, they'll be like, my mom is my queen, right? And the mother, and I hear women say this all the time, my son is my king. No, ma'am, your son is not supposed to be your king. Your son is your son, right? But we have no, when we are doing this as women or as a parent, we don't actually realize just how we are stunting the child's emotional growth. And we are all but ensuring they will never, ever be emotionally available to any partner in the future. So, so in a marriage dynamic, the two women, the queen bee, the mom, the first wife, surrogate wife, and the wife of choice, the one you're legally married to, they will always have this competition. We talk about mother-in-law from hell all the time, right? So in a situation like that, the two women are competing, and for all intents and purposes, for the mother, she would treat the son's wife as the other woman, the side chick, because that dynamic of mother, dynamic of surrogate husband was established in childhood, but the two people have no idea, and it can be, it's such a a stew of dysfunction, because none of the three parties, and even the children involved, no one is ever happy. But for those of us who are raising children, it is so important, and especially boy children, we are very conscious of how we are relating to them and how we are obligating them, because as much as we say, I love my son to death, there is some things you will never be able to provide for him. That is intimacy, companionship, what people need from a partner. You will never give that to your son, to your child. So you obligating them in that way, you're all but ensuring they will never ever have fulfillment, and they will never be emotionally available to their biological the biological family, because they feel like they are always obligated to their family of origin. I hope that summarizes it.
It's very clear. Joanne, so what's the difference between enmeshment and just being close as family members?
Good morning, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. So just like Jacinta said, there is a very thin line between being enmeshed and just being close. The distinct difference is that there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries where one person ends and the other person starts. And typically in this enmeshed environment, and Jacinta talked about the mother and son, which is what we see most commonly. There is also mother and daughter, which is also quite common. Then there is the father and son, but then there's also siblings. Siblings who are super enmeshed and have zero boundaries. So when you're in these situations where you feel like people are violating your boundaries, people are intruding in your relationships, this is not a closeness, this is an enmeshment. When you're, especially in romantic relationships, because that is where it really typically shows up. When you're dating, or when you have gotten married and have children. When your sister-in-laws come and start telling you how to raise your children, when your mother-in-law comes and starts rearranging your home and telling you how to cook for her son, when she starts telling you how to dress your children, when you just do not have the autonomy to be you in your home, and your partner is not able to stand up to his family or her family, that is where you know there is enmeshment. And it's not just closeness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes too much sense. I'm just wondering, because this is me, and if you don't have an answer, it's fine. So what's a different? I don't know if you know the concept of Oedipus and Othello's complex in psychiatry. And Sarah, you can jump in if you remember any of that. Is it?
I don't. No.
Sarah, do you remember?
No.
This is in psychiatry, as he just saw my psychiatry.
I am so sorry. Psychology and psychiatry. Okay, so okay. Sarah, no, okay. No, Oedipus, okay, let me just say, putting back my Sikukula school fees hat. So it's basically emotional incest. I'll let you guys explain. But Oedipus is when a father is very enmeshed with the daughter, and Othello is the mother and whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but just define emotional incest. Is this still part of the whole thing? Okay, go ahead. Just
yeah. So in an enmeshment, there is going to be emotional incest. Definitely, there is emotional incest. There is also parentification that goes on from a very young age. And let me just define what that is. Emotional incest is when an adult relies on a child to become the person who holds space for them, the person who plays therapist, and the parent is sharing very heavy information, let's say her relationship her relationship problems with a child. So if it's a mother and son, and she's having problems with the husband or within the marriage, she relies on the son to be the one. She dumps all that information, what your father is doing, how the marriage is going, how it's making me feel. And for the child who is being, remember, children are just developing, their brain is not even developed at that point. And nobody wants to hear about mom and dad's relationship details, right? It's too heavy of information, but more importantly, it's very damaging emotionally. So when adults rely on their children, and we always say, oh, my son is so mature for his age, or my daughter is very mature for her age, so I go to her and she gives me advice. Your daughter is 14, she's a child. It doesn't matter how much they look mature for their age. That is not their job to listen to your problems in that level. They are not equipped to be that. That's why you hire a coach, a therapist, go to your support system, go to your friends. But when we give too much heavy information to children, that is emotional incest. When we expect them to be our BFF, our therapist, our arbitrator between us and our husbands, all that is emotional incest. Now, parentification is where the child takes on the role of raising raising not only her or his siblings, but also the parents. So they become a parentified or a parent at a very young age. And then between all that, there's also a lot of triangulation that goes on within that dynamic, where the Enmeshment party, usually it's the older, the adult, they triangulate. That means that they tell every member of the family about the other. They are, how do I explain this? It's where we go to, let's say Joanne and I share a mom, and mom wants to be in control of how we see each other and how we see her. She wants to maintain that level of control. So she goes to Joanne and tells Joanne, by the way, your sister Jacinta, I was talking to her and she said, can you go to Jacinta and talk to her? Then she comes to me and says, your sister Joanne is doing XXXY and she's making me feel this way and this way. Can you talk to Joanne? But all this time, this triangulation is meant to keep the mother in control of everything. So there's always an element of triangulation in an enmeshment. And the people who are in it, they just think that's their normal. But for somebody who is on the outside, and especially when you're somebody who marries into the family, you will be like asking what kind of a toxic stew of dysfunction is this? And they expect you to fall in line, and you cannot question. And even within the family dynamic, the child who decides this is too much, this is too toxic, this is too dysfunctional, they get labeled, they're shamed, they're guilted, they're called the black sheep, and sometimes they are threatened with being disinherited, with being kicked out of the tribe. And it's very, very scary for the person, because again, we are social beings, we want to be a part of the tribe. And when you're threatened with being kicked out of that tribe, it can cause you a lot of anxiety, and even send you into a tailspin mentally in terms of your mental health. So it's actually very not only dysfunctional, but very, very problematic for the people who are in it. And more importantly, they can never develop any sense of autonomy by themselves or within their marriages.
And is there like a hierarchy? Like, is the enmeshed parent equally enmeshed to all the children, or it's like the way parentification, especially the firstborn daughters bear the brunt of the parentification, because they're the ones who are deputy parents or the Margaret Thatchers of the house. When you're enmeshed, is the mother enmeshed to the first to the sixthborn the same way, or it's different?
I think it's different. The one child who displays a lot of empathy tends to be the one who is most enmeshed. See, in any family, there are those who are kichwangumu. They are just going to be, I don't want to do this. I'm not signing up for it. That child is less likely to be enmeshed, but that child will be guilted and shamed and called out and ganged up against. And as I said, they may be labeled, oh, that's the black sheep of our family. Or you may hear them say, me, I'm the black sheep of the family, because they did not fall in line with the expectation. And when we say that, when we talk about falling in line, it means emotionally, physically, financially, every which way. You're obligated. There's no boundaries. They want to know how much money you make. They want to know how you spend your money, how much you're spending on your wife, all that. Yeah.
And if I can add, yeah, I wanted to say also the child who typically gets enmeshed is an empath, a true empath, and a highly sensitive child. And there's a difference. An empath is just a person who is very connected to other people's emotions and their own. But a highly sensitive child is one who actually feels the energy of other people and takes it and owns it as their own. Yes. So if there's dysfunction in the parent's relationship, or if the parent is going through struggle, whether it's a single parent going through financial struggles and all the things, or if it's a marriage where there's discord between husband and wife, that child who is an empath and highly sensitive child is the one who is going to fall victim to one of the parents and become enmeshed with the parent. And then the triangulation also in a two-parent family home. There is the parents triangulating with the child, father telling the child this about mother, and mother telling the child this about the other. So then the child is caught in this horrible web of having to take sides with one of the parents. And the child is not equipped, like Jacinta said, the child is still forming, the brain is still forming. This child did not choose the parents. The parents chose each other for this child. And it is not the child's responsibility to make peace or keep peace between the two of you when you have discord in the home. And it also happens a lot where parents are either divorced or children were born out of wedlock, and the two parents are not together and there is co-parenting happening. The triangulation is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And then when you have the enmeshed mother, who is the father of the children, mother of the father of the children, where there is co-parenting, she gets involved in this triangulation of the husband, the father, the child, and it becomes very messy and very dysfunctional.
Yes. Is there or Jacinta, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add that there is also for the enmeshing party, there's also extreme neediness. They have extreme neediness, and the neediness tends to come up when the enmeshed child, seems like they are living their best life. And so if, again, I'm sticking with the mother-son enmeshment. So when the son looks like he's finding happiness with another person, then the mom has all kinds of needs. Her joints are hurting, her hip is hurting, she needs this, she needs that. And it's really meant to pull him away from, remember, he's giving attention to another person that is not mom. So for the son, he's gonna spend almost a lifetime trying to, doing what we call fragile compromises, right? So I gotta run to mom, placate her, meet her needs because she needs me. And you may hear him say, my mom needs me. I gotta go see what she needs, right? So he's gonna go and placate the mom and what she needs. And then he's going to run back to the wife and try to, because she's now seething. We were supposed to be going to dinner. Mom has called. Now she is in this extreme need of something. And now I'm sitting here having to wait for you to soothe your mom, to pacify your mom. So I'm already upset, right? So now he runs to me to try to placate me and soothe me. That's what we call fragile compromises. It's I've calmed that fire, put out that fire for now. Tomorrow we are back at it. Do you see? So for the person who is stuck in the middle, that person will never, ever, ever know happiness or peace because he's being pulled different directions. And so when we are not aware of the extreme emotional labor the person is doing, the enmeshed person is doing, it's dangerous at all levels. But and then there's children who are stuck in the middle of this tug of war, and they become aware of what's going on. So yes, the extreme neediness, I wanted to add that it's part of it. The extreme neediness, clinginess, lack of emotional autonomy. I cannot live my best life without you, my son or my daughter by my side. And this can go on until the person is in their 50s and 60s. Yeah.
And just to bring full circle, because a lot of times when we're having these conversations, some people will be like, that doesn't apply to me. The best way to see if there is enmeshment happening is if you're in a relationship with somebody, or if you're even the one who is enmeshed, if you feel like you're being manipulated, if you tend to say, my mom is manipulative, or your mom is manipulative, or my mother-in-law is manipulative, that is that extreme neediness. Because right when you have a vacation to Santorini, you've booked tickets, everybody is ready to go, she's in Aga Khan hospital because her hip did something and all the plans have to be stopped. And you are the only person who can take care of that. She doesn't want to hear that her siblings can take care of her or anybody else. It has to be you, that particular child. You have to drop everything and go to her. That is that level of manipulation and neediness at the expense of your own needs is what enmeshment is. When you find yourself or your partner or your child self-abandoning and canceling things that are super important to them because of a parent or because of siblings or because of whoever, then that is enmeshment.
Yes, and to add to that, in a dynamic like this, it's the neediness that comes up is intended to derail your chance at happiness, your chance at pouring attention on another person. Not to mention the language that is used is very guilting. You know me, one day I'm gonna die and you guys are gonna miss me. You know me, I'm all alone. Nobody ever cares about me. You know me, niko hapa, sorry for the Swahili, I'm just here. So it's not a direct statement like, hey, I need your help here for a little bit. It is guilting language. It's gaslighting language. And so it destabilizes you. It guilts you. And some people, I've seen it so much to where people are canceling entire vacations because mom needs them.
Is it a case of weaponized incompetence just just to ensure that their needs are met?
What was that?
Is it a case of weaponizing their incompetence or their neediness so that their needs are met?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's incompetence. It is. It's more like.
It's really a manipulation.
It's manipulation,
really like
emotional manipulation. Yeah,
it's emotional manipulation. It is refusing as an adult to be responsible for yourself and imposing the responsibility on a child And a lot of times it's not intentional. So I want us to also talk about the fact that this is not a mother or a father or a sister who wakes up and says, today I'm going to make sure my sister-in-law Jacinta does not go to Santorini because I'm jealous of her. That is not the intention. It is just the constant, it's rooted in loneliness. It is rooted in loneliness. So the person who is enmeshing a child, because it starts in childhood again, right? It's that parent is lonely because his or her needs are not being met by the partner or by the adults in their life. Because if you're a single parent, your child is not to meet your needs. You go find other adults to meet your needs, or you meet your own needs yourself. So when your child starts becoming the person who is going to meet your needs, you start telling this child that they're your bestie. You start saying these things when the child is really young. You're my everything. I don't know what I would do if you left. Then this child starts, because a child's brain is very, very sensitive. So age 0 to 6, or actually age 0 to 26, whatever you tell a child, they take that very concretely and it becomes reality. They don't have the discernment most of the time to be like, you know what, mom is just lonely. She's just saying whatever. I still have my friends here. That usually shows up even at very young ages, when a child is very young, where the mom is incapable of dropping off their child to Jacinta's house so that the child can go play with Jacinta's son. They want to be there for the play dates and not leave the child to have their own friends, their own autonomy. They interfere with the child's life and livelihood from a very young age.
Yes.
So it stems from loneliness. It's not just a person who decides, oh, I'm just going to mess everybody's life. It is a lonely human being interfering with the only person who is super close to them and interfering with their livelihood and their autonomy and their ability to create healthy relationships with other people outside of the parents.
Yes, and if I can add to that about the parent or the enmeshing party has some needs that haven't been met, emotional needs that haven't been met. In one of the most extreme case of enmeshment I've ever seen it's a father-daughter enmeshment, and it was a case where father is married to mom, always had health issues and mental health issues. So the bond between father and mom was the dad's needs were not being met, and the child became parentified at a very young age. And so the daughter became almost like the surrogate wife of the dad. And into adulthood, this man could never move on or have a life outside of his daughter. Daughter buys a house, dad moves into the basement, builds a man cave in her basement. He's always camped there, gets very triggered whenever she's dating any other man. And he like the men are ran off. The guys she's trying to date are being run off by the dad because he gets very lonely, very possessive, and very entitled to all her attention. And so she could never create any healthy relationships with men because dad needs her all the time. And even on social media, dad, his profile picture is that of his daughter. This is a full-grown woman, right? And so it's a case where there's extreme loneliness on the part of the dad, but he was never able to go figure out how to get his own needs met, emotional needs met. He was never able to find happiness on his own or navigate that, get therapy, whatever is needed. And so it's almost like he's holding on, latching on to her, but at the same time, really holding her back from ever realizing her own happiness or her own companionship. And even her, when she she starts giving attention to other men, she guilts herself because she feels like she's abandoning the father. It's a very, very complex dynamic, and it's destructive on all levels.
Okay, Mathari, you can ask your question. Just unmute yourself, and if you have a question, but they raise your hand, this is a very open forum. You can ask. Mathari, go ahead.
Yeah, it's so helpful to hear. So I was that child. I was the big-headed one who just was not. I was the black sheep of the family. My brother was the enmeshed child. He's 4 years younger than me. He was a golden child, everything. Now I grew up with a father who was enmeshed with his mother. So my grandmother was involved in every single thing. We go on holidays, she's there. We do anything at home, she's there. We go to her house every weekend. So I've grown up knowing the dysfunction with all this enmeshment style. So I moved out of home early 20s. I had my son, and my brother continued to be in that cycle. But what happened was, he was so enmeshed with my father that he got into heavy debt. And I think that triggered my brother. So he cut off ties with my dad. And then my mom cannot stand the fact that there's a woman in his life and everything you're saying. You know, he's bought a house and this woman is the one, she's holding the keys in the picture. Oh my God, my mom got so triggered. So the only thing is that lucky for him, he lives in Norway, right? And he's recently cut himself off from the family. So what I'm finding now is my mom and dad are like looking to me now. It's almost like they're coming back to me to start, you know, songs of praise and whatnot and trying to get close. And my mom actually got to the place of manipulation. So 2 things I wanted to ask about is, one, does it happen that when the enmeshed child cuts off, they start looking for another target? And number 2 is my son is turning 16 years old in September, and I'm single mom. I'm very close with my son, yes. But I always knew in my heart of hearts, like when he goes through his circumcision at 15, which was last year, I need to cut the cord because I never wanted to create a scenario for what I saw my dad and my grandmother living like, right? So I made the decision to let him go and go live with his dad, which has shocked the whole family. The whole family is like, what? You know, my mom and dad called me and said, you should have called us to discuss this. And I'm like, why am I calling you to discuss what I'm deciding for my son? It's time for him to grow up and go live with a man. I can raise a boy, but I can't raise a man. You know, he's at that stage to be a man. So I'm loving it. I'm loving my space. I'm loving my freedom now because I've been a mom since 22. But it's this fighting with them again. Well, I'm not fighting with them, to be honest. I've just cut off. I let them talk. But what can I do in a situation that I'm in to make sure my son and I also don't fall into that trap? And is that the first good move of distancing myself?
So I think with the fact,
I'm just adding more things. Is that emotional contagion? If it's a time you haven't had, just skip me. I'm usually okay. Skip. Joanne, I have seen you. Okay, go ahead.
Big words. Let's use them.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so Mogoni, I think setting those boundaries is going to be the only way actually to get out of these enmeshed situations is to start setting boundaries the way you did. Mogoni and I know each other personally, so I know what she's talking about. And setting boundaries and just letting everybody know this is a no-go zone. And you can expect people to be triggered. You can expect triangulation. You can expect auntie so-and-so is going to be called, uncle so-and-so is going to be called. Everybody is going to be involved in this. That is the triangulation we are talking about. And it's meant to guilt you for making a decision without consulting people who are not even part of you raising your son, right? But they feel very entitled. Mm-hmm. And it's to create chaos. And it's your job as a mother to protect your son, especially from all these noisemakers. Grandma calling and saying your mom did this, your auntie so-and-so, Auntie Caro is calling, Auntie Susan is calling. All these people are calling to give him essentially noise to confuse him or to confuse you. So for you, how you set boundaries and said, time out. This is not a subject that I'm discussing with the entire family. That's the right decision because our children learn boundaries from how we are setting them ourselves and how we are respecting their own boundaries as well, right? This is why we go into adulthood without knowing how to set boundaries, because our boundaries were violated every which way, right? So you setting boundaries is crucial. The first couple months of setting boundaries, as I said, you can expect guilting, shaming, people triggered, people feeling entitled. And within you, you can expect a feeling of anxiety, feeling of loneliness, feeling like you're about to lose a tribe. That is all normal. But it's so crucial that you actually find a support system outside of the family, people who can
I
hold.
actually had to block my mom, Jacinta, because she started calling my brother in Norway and doing what you're saying. You know what you're saying, the example of you call the other child and calling my brother and giving him all this information, calling my grandmothers and everybody getting involved. I've had to block my mom. My dad has, I just firmly said, so he's backed off. He's understood that, you know, it's not a situation to get tied into. But the guilt and shame, I'm not going through that so much because I went through a heavy moment of guilt and shame when I gave birth at 22 years old. And I already started distancing myself from the family. So what they think, I really don't care. For me, doing the work with you and Joanne from last year really opened my eyes to, I could easily fall into that trap of making my child an emotional cushion, you know, and holding on to him and this and that. So, yeah, thank you for that. And then boundaries for, I don't want to be now the child they want to enmesh because they don't have access to my brother anymore.
Can I chime in from a different perspective? And this is from the child's perspective, okay? Because this child, you had him at 22, so he was obviously the first grandchild for all these people and the first great grandchild. So he is loved dearly by everybody, and everybody feels some level of ownership to him. So there is two things here. There is acknowledging that there's an ownership that people feel, a love, a deep love that is genuine for this child, because this is our first child and all the things, right? So your dad is, your dad, that's his first grandson, and they're buddies, and your dad is the one who was involved in doing this whole circumcision thing and all the things, right? So there is a genuine feel of they've been involved in his life, and now the child has been taken and been given to another family that has not been equally involved. So there's a grieving process for them, which will cause this anxiety, right? And this is something that we don't think about. While you're doing the right thing for the child, there is a grieving process that your family is going through because they've lost that child to somebody else. They have not truly lost the child because they probably still have access to him. They can hang out with him and whatever, but there is a grieving process that is happening, which is also the same grieving process that happens when a girl is married off to another family and her family starts seeing her living her best life, having a great relationship with her mother-in-law and her sisters-in-law. And now the mother and the sisters are like, oh my God, she left us and she likes those people more than she likes us. It is just recognizing that multiple truths can coexist. This child can be raised by his father, have a good relationship with his other side of the family, but still be loved and be part of your family. But right now, at this moment, the right thing for him is to be taught by his dad how to be a man, because you're a woman and you cannot teach him how to be a man. So I just wanted that to be on the forefront as you block the people and as you tell them no. Just remember there's a grieving process that nobody is considering here. Secondly, for that child, there needs to be conversations about how he feels about watching everybody struggle with the decision that has been made for him to go live with his dad. Because that is the other person we don't consider. We don't consider the child, how he's feeling, how he's feeling about the chaos that even if he's the one who said, you know what, I want to go live with my dad. Typically, we don't consider how our behavior as adults makes the child feel. And so maybe this is something that all the adults in his life may not be qualified to deal with, and he may need to talk to a therapist about how he's feeling. Because also emotional safety for him to say, you know what, I hate that all the adults in my life are so childish and immature, and the way they are behaving, and it's affecting me. He cannot say that to you guys. He needs a safe person who is impartial to the situation to help him deal with those feelings of how he feels. Then also there might be the decision, yes, is for him to go live with his dad, and his dad is happy and whatever, but is the rest of the dad's family happy to have him? And what does that look like for him, right? And maybe these are all things that you've dealt with, but it is important to also consider what the child is going through and what the child is seeing and what the adults in his life are telling him. Because that is that if your parents are capable of triangulating you and your brother, they are also immature enough to triangulate your son.
Pretty much.
Please recommend a therapist for kids if you can on WhatsApp. And another
I'll send you a list. Yes.
Please, and spot on everything you've said. My mom has been so, and my son said it himself. He said to me in passing, you know how Shosho is. Like, he understands that she is dramatic and over the top and, you know, doing all these things. And just to keep that open conversation. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.
So back to the big word I introduced. It's just English, emotional contagion, as in, kuambukiza. You see, like the way we are going to use Modoni because she's our permission to use your family dynamics here. But
Yeah,
Modoni
sure, go ahead.
started off the enmeshment, then her mother. And then you see now Modoni is blocking it. It's like, is there like a situation where this enmeshment is ambukizwad? There's no other word.
It's stopped.
Yeah, can it be contagious?
Or can it be contagious?
Yeah, kuambukiza is contagious, yes.
I think so, because in the case where I said siblings also can become enmeshed with each other, where did they learn enmeshment? They saw children learn how to be humans from the adults in their lives. Mm-hmm. So if, say, and I'm going to use my family is not enmeshed, just let me put it out there, we are not enmeshed, but I'm going to use my family as an example, right? My mom and her siblings are very close, but they're not enmeshed. They're not in each other's business. They respect it. They are one of the most boundaried families I know. Now, if they were enmeshed, right, we would know and learn how to be adults and how to relate to each other from them. So if my mom's sisters were all up in my mom's business and my mom was all up in their business about how they raise their children, which schools they go to, all the things, what would me and my sister be doing? Same exact thing. So yes, it is contagious. I don't like the word contagious. Children just learn how to be from the adults in their lives.
Yeah, it's cycles.
So it's cycles, yes.
Yes.
My other question is enmeshment just family oriented, or can I be enmeshed to my workmate? Can I be enmeshed with my pastor? Can I be enmeshed with my neighbor? Does it inavuka mpaka? Does it cross the family boundaries?
You can be enmeshed in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, it is. It's usually in romantic relationships. It's not in work relationships. It is not. You cannot be enmeshed with a friend. Mm-mm. It is usually family related, and family now crosses over to the romantic relationship, right? But never with with friends. Like me and Jacinta cannot be enmeshed.
No.
Even those BFFs and those posses and chamas that I have to tell Jacinta and Joanne that
That's
have you
That's just lack
No.
of boundaries.
That is just
Okay.
a lack of boundaries.
And
It's not
dysfunction.
enmeshment. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Because the definition, I like, there's a Dr. Ken Adams who has written some really good books about enmeshment, and I'll share the books later on. One is called When He Is Married to Mom.
Oh, yes.
And then the other one is called The Silent, Silently Seduced, yes. And then there's another one called The Hidden Legacy of Adult Children of Sex Addicts. Like, he is an enmeshment specialist, expert, right? And his definition of enmeshment, I'm just going to read it for you guys over here real quick, is, gosh, did I lose it? No. Okay, give me 1 second. Enmeshment is rooted in a lonely parent who substitutes their child for a partner. This leads to adult children who feel a sense of obligations to the parent's well-being, even at the expense of their own needs and the life they've created. So it's not to do with a workmate, a friend, or it's typically a parent-child relationship, but then it can flow over to siblings. So it's usually people in the same family of origin. And like for me, I cannot even be enmeshed with my cousins because we did not grow up in the same home. They may be enmeshed with each other as siblings or with their parents, but not me and my cousins, unless the people grew up in the same home and just witnessed that as a way of life.
Yes.
So let me ask, can spouses push you to be enmeshed? As in, if my husband and I are having issues, then he becomes lonely in the relationship. Am I at fault if my husband gets enmeshed with, God forbid, he's asleep, with my daughter? No.
Oh, with your daughter, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And let me ask
because remember, typically the parent who is enmeshed with the child has emotional, physical, all sorts of needs not being met in that relationship. So they start looking for their needs to be met, because there's also something else that we didn't talk about. Majority of the parents who enmesh with their children are also emotionally immature adults. Because an adult who is emotionally mature and emotionally secure is not going to go tell a child certain things. They know a child is a child and should not be told certain things, and certain things should not be shared with a child. So they will go seek either therapy, seek a coach, talk to their siblings, talk to other adults, not to the child. So if your husband, because we are using your husband as case in point here, is emotionally immature, then he will get enmeshed with your daughter if his needs are not being met by you.
Exactly.
My other question is, for all the other, like if we go to the addiction side, like if I'm having unmet needs within a certain relationship, I might resort to drinking, to looking for sex workers, or be involved in sex work myself, and it gives me like a high, because I want, it balances or gives me a high. Does the enmeshment also give you a high, or it's just it's a balm for your soul in a different way?
I don't know if it gives you a high, like the way an addiction gives you, like shopping addiction, alcohol addiction, cigarette addiction, religious addiction, all those addictions. I think it just gives you a feeling of somebody who is meeting your needs, your emotional needs. And in this case, the child becomes that person you latch onto that consistently gives you that sense of fulfillment that you don't have within your relationship or within yourself. You're not securely attached within yourself. So that child becomes that band-aid that it is constantly needing to cover that deep sense of loneliness, aloneness, emotional needs not being met. And the child themselves actually end up obligating themselves to you. My mom is not happy. I need to be the one to bring her that happiness. I don't like that my mom is lonely. I cannot stand this. I just want to be there for her. So it's even the child obligates himself or herself to the parent, because he or she can see the parent suffering, and he or she are not comfortable with the parent suffering. So it's actually an exchange that is going on between the two enmeshed parties.
And remember, like I said from the very beginning, the child who gets enmeshed is highly sensitive and empathetic. So
exactly.
The parent doesn't even need to say anything. The child can see and
they can read
feel.
It. Mm-hmm.
They can see and feel. So Nema asked, how would you protect the daughter from an example given by Posa? It is, one, knowing what kind of relationship you are in. Two, knowing your own emotional maturity and the emotional maturity of your partner or the dad of the child or the mother of the child, whatever the case is. And children typically start getting enmeshed from a very young age. Mm-hmm. So if you have a child that is highly sensitive, and knowing a child who is highly sensitive is it's an art. It's like you have to be very emotionally in tune with yourself to be able to be in tune with this child. A lot of emotionally sensitive children are mistreated and usually are very quiet and usually tend to come and tell you how other children, like, the easiest way to know who an emotionally sensitive child is, or a very empathetic child is they will come and tell you about the injustices happening to other children in school or outside. That is how you know your child is super in tune with other children and other people's emotions. Or if your child also dislikes and resists and is very sensitive to how you punish or discipline their siblings. That is how you know a child who is highly sensitive, because whatever happens to their siblings affects them, even if it's nothing to do with them. Or whatever happens to other children in class. When a child comes home and says, our teacher is mean to Jacinta, she said blah, blah, blah to Jacinta, that is a highly sensitive child. And that child can be easily be prone to enmeshment if there's dysfunction in the home. So that's how you identify. How do you protect a child like that from enmeshment? I really don't know, because you cannot control how another adult behaves. And you cannot control the relationship between a child and their other parent. However, if you hear the other parent telling a child stuff that you know should not be told to a child, then that is where you start setting boundaries and having conversations with this other adult about what to tell the child. And then as an adult or as parents, stop having these fights in front of your children. Stop having a war of words that affect your children's well-being. That also starts molding the child into taking sides unconsciously with the parent they look at as the victim in the situation. I hope that makes sense, Nema.
Let me just add to that. Is that many parents tend to to attach parenthood as part of their identity, right? So we become mom. So momhood becomes an extension of our identity. And what I've seen is that women, us women especially, we tend to abandon our womanhood and become full-time, we identify as mother. And sometimes we are identifying as mom and wife. And so our womanhood, our own self-care, what we used to do before our primary identity takes a back seat, and these secondary identities, motherhood, wifehood, then take precedence. So the abandoning of the self can lead into this now dynamic where you're over-relying on motherhood and the child, or fatherhood and the child, to continue your sense of identity. And this has terrible consequences when the children now leave your nest, they're going to college, or they're getting married, they're going to live their best lives. Then you end up not just going through this heartbreak and grieving, you feel like all your whole identity has been shattered. This is where we see now parents packing up, buying homes in the town where their children is going to university. This is when you see parents going into full-blown depression. There is definitely going to be a grieving process when your child leaves, but in these extreme cases where your whole identity was tied up to being a mother or a father, it's you feel like actually they are doing this against you. They are doing this to abandon you or to hurt you, right? The fact that they chose to go become adults themselves, and it becomes really, really difficult. And the child is, at that point, they are trying to run away from you. Sometimes they ghost you because all they are trying to do is establish a sense of independence and autonomy and ability to just grow up. And so mom, dad, they go into full-blown panic because the child has chosen to establish them establish independence, and you feel like that's an assault on you because your whole entire identity was tied to being somebody's mom, somebody's dad. So when we go back now to when we have children, we have to continue doing our own self-care. We have to continue having our own independent relationships. We have to have our own independent friendships. We have to continue having a full life that is outside of that identity of mom, wife, because otherwise when all that is taken away, you're like, who am I without this cushion that I've held on to for so long? Yeah.
And so are these parents who become helicopter moms and tiger moms and what are they called, lone moa moms, the ones who just want to crash any obstacle in front of their children? Or
I think that's a totally different spectrum of parenting. In terms of enmeshment, what happens to the parent who is enmeshed when their child actually goes away either to college or goes away to get married or moves to another country? It's literally the same feeling as a romantic relationship breaking. The same kind of heartbreak, the same kind of loneliness, the same kind of emptiness. That is what happens. So anybody who's been through a heartbreak, a breakup of any type, that is what happens to an enmeshed parent. And that's why there's the constant looking for this person, the constant trying to interfere with the progress the person is making moving on, right? Because if your romantic partner has left you and they've moved on to other things, typically, if you're not boundaried and if you're not emotionally mature, you don't accept the breakup. What do? You chase. You chase the person. You move. You stalk the person. You do the most ridiculous things that make the person even dislike you more. So Now, unfortunately for the child, they cannot dislike you. They cannot do certain things, which is why somebody like Modoni's brother is like, block everybody. I don't want anything to do with you guys. I'm out of the country. I'm not even going to communicate. And a lot of times for the people outside of this whole relationship are looking at a son like Modoni's brother as being mean and horrible to his parents, without knowing the background. This child has been a surrogate spouse to his mom and a surrogate whatever to the dad. And now everything has just come to a screeching halt. And he's like, I need to have autonomy. I need to have a healthy relationship with my wife or girlfriend or whoever. I need to make my own decisions. All the damage that has been done to me from childhood to now, I'm cutting off. And I need to have autonomy and I need to fix my life. And you guys need to be adults and take care of yourselves. And so for those of us looking from the outside in, we are like, oh, how horrible. This person just went abroad and cut off the parents. That is a story we usually do not know.
Yes.
Because we gaslight the person saying your parents sold all their land to take you abroad, blah, blah, blah. But what we do not know is what that child's lived experience with these parents was, and him or her going abroad and having to be able to cut off the parents or the siblings or whoever, is them claiming their autonomy and doing the things that serve them as an individual without being forced into these family dynamics that are super dysfunctional and unhealthy.
Yes, and sometimes the person they're in a partnership with, let's say a wife or a girlfriend, has seen the dysfunction, and sometimes they have given an ultimatum. If this is going to work, I cannot have you and your mother and your father and your sister and your cousin and your grandmother as part. This relationship is too crowded, so that might serve as a wake-up call, and so the person is forced to, I'm going to stop talking to the family or block the family so I can build this other relationship because it's important to me. So usually in such cases, the partner has said, this is too much. I cannot do this. This is too much. And so you make a choice. And then that may be the wake-up call. But I think for an enmeshment, really the only way to really unlearn and heal from an enmeshment is therapy. Dr. Adams says that it takes 4 seasons of therapy. And that 4 seasons means like a whole year, right? Of working with a therapist who is an expert in boundaries and enmeshment. And it's unlearning of patterns and behaviors that have taken a whole lifetime. So you have to take the time to understand the toll it's taken on you in every which way, and also how to start setting healthy boundaries with everyone, right? And there is no way you can do that in 2 weeks. You have to go into therapy, and you cannot start by dragging the whole family system into, let's go into group therapy. Now that is not gonna work. You have to do your own therapy first. And that's about the only way you can unlearn this. It's taking the time to go through that healing process.
So it's the same for Modoni's parents, because I'm just wondering if my father would actually, if we were enmeshed, if he would unlearn and actually go to therapy, or them we just
you have to take responsibility for your own healthy relationships. And a lot of times, just to piggyback on what Jacinta said, where there's a partner or a spouse or a friend, it could also be a friend, it could also be a coworker. This is where the people who you have healthy relationships with on the outside are emotionally mature enough to see that you have dysfunction in your family, and they'll be like, it is not normal for a mother to behave like that. Why do you allow your mother to do stuff like that? And then the person, because for them, this started as a child, they thought it was normal. And now here comes an outsider who is like pointing from the outside in. And if you have a healthy relationship with this outsider, it's not necessarily a romantic partner. It just could be somebody who is a good friend to you that says, the way your mom behaves is not normal. And then you start becoming curious about how other family dynamics operate. And you're like, for real, my mom or my dad is out of control and this is not normal. So now you start self-discovery and you start healing the parts of you and maybe going to therapy. And the therapist tells you you need to cut ties so that you can find yourself and then work on yourself. And then at some point, maybe start dealing with the family. And that's why Jacinta is saying you have to do therapy for seasons by yourself. And typically, the rest of the family will not join you unless they understand their own dysfunction.
Yes, they have to be.
Because again, using Modoni's family as an example, it started with their grandmother, and who knows what their great grandmother was like. So it is a pattern that has happened, right? So the brother is now maybe becoming the cycle breaker, and he's like, I'm not doing this. Modoni is also like, I'm not doing this. So now the cycle ends with these children, Modoni and her brother, right? But
Yes.
the parents will still be who they are. And the only way you can relate with them is by having very solid boundaries, which means you have to keep saying no consistently, every day, all the time. Sometimes you have to cut contact to stay healthy, because again, these people will take you down a tailspin and depress you and create anxiety. So you have to protect yourself from them, unfortunately.
And also the benefit of distancing yourself while you're doing this work. You're going through therapy, you're going through healing, you're learning about how to set healthy boundaries. There is truth in the saying, your healing can never take place in the same environment your wounding is taking place. Those two cannot coexist. So you cannot really do the work of healing or learning to become healthy yourself or undo the damage of the enmeshment if you are still in that vortex, right? So the saying your healing will never take place in the same environment your wounding took place. The person who wounded you will never be your healer. There's truth in that. So that's why the distance is required. And a lot of times I've seen situations where people are aware now, this is full-blown toxicity that I'm dealing with my mom. I'm gonna block her for some time to keep out the noise. Or if you are strong enough, you can distance without blocking. But for the most part, or sometimes it's something as simple as, I'm not talking to these people on the phone. I'll do exchanges by text, because you can control how you're texting, you're communicating on WhatsApp, because when you pick up the phone, by the time you are done with that conversation, your nervous system is completely dysregulated. So there are people who choose, I'm only talking to them by text or via WhatsApp, because I can control the amount of communication. Because again, as you know, in some of these things, talking on the phone with some people will leave you completely feeling insane after the end of the conversation. Yeah.
So my question, because you're almost at 1 hour, 30 minutes. My question, if you're talking to new parents and for you, Jacinta, because you're a relationship person, how do we sniff out people who are enmeshed so that I don't get into that mess, or help whoever I'm in love with completely to get out of that mess before we are a union? And for new parents, how do I make sure my antennas are high so that I don't, even if I have issues with my eventual partner, I never ever enmesh my child? That was yes, it was. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so because I work with women and I teach a class, and as Joanne does, one of the classes we have, one of the master classes is boundaries and enmeshment. You can't really solve a problem you don't know exists. So one of the first things we do in my classes, we start because my class is about self-love. And by that, I mean, it is coming back home to your authentic self, coming back home to the self. And that identity and the relationship with the self is formed in childhood. So we start out with how your childhood formed, how you relate with yourself, how you relate with others, and boundaries and enmeshments and trauma bonding is part of the classes that we offer, that we go through, and then how you start seeing these patterns within yourself, within your family, and how to start correcting them, and now how moving forward you make sure that we are breaking these cycles. We become cycle breakers, because if we are unconscious of them, we continue to bleed the same cycles to our children, and then they will continue in the same patterns themselves, because that's all they know. So it starts with having these lessons, these classes, to bring that awareness. And then once you are aware, what do we do about it, right? So then you start understanding not just yourself, you start understanding your family dynamics and how they have shaped how you're showing up in every other area of your life, and especially in your relationships, and your relationships even with your children. So that's the only way we can be able to tackle this, is bring awareness and start putting names and terms to some of these behaviors. Because most people, if you ask them what is an enmeshment, they don't know. And most people will say, me and my mom are very close, or me and I come from a very close family, only to realize, yeah, this is extreme lack of boundaries. It's not closeness. So because closeness and healthy relationships have a healthy dose of boundaries between the parties. Even in a romantic relationship, it will never, marriage, a romantic relationship would never survive or become long-term healthy relationship if there's no boundaries between the two people who are in it. Parent-child relationship will never be a healthy relationship if there's no boundaries between the parent and the children.
Joanne?
You want me to answer the same question?
Two questions.
So for new parents or anybody who are wanting to not enmesh themselves with their child, I would say emotional intelligence is the thing. So while Jacinta is teaching you self-love and all the things, how do you feel? Do you know how you feel? Do you know why you're feeling it? Do you know what your body is telling you? Do you know what those sensations in your body are telling you? Because those are the things that make adults go to children for emotional support, right? So if your romantic relationship is not going well and your needs are not being met emotionally by the adults, then you're going to the child because you are not emotionally mature or emotionally in tune with yourself, and you don't know how to meet your own needs, or perhaps you don't even know what you need, or you don't know how you're feeling. So for me, when I teach my boundaries class and my inner child class, which really typically cover boundaries at any given time, I always incorporate emotional intelligence, because as long as you don't know how you're feeling, why you're feeling it, where you're feeling it, and what you need, you will always be dysfunctional. Always be dysfunctional in any relationship. So I think the biggest takeaway is learn and understand your feelings, learn and understand your body. Be connected to your body from neck down, not up here. It's not a thinking thing. It is literally feeling your body. When you brush your teeth, do you feel the sensations in your mouth? What the Colgate or Aquafresh or whatever is doing in your mouth? Or are you so disconnected that you're not present? This requires presence. If you feel a stomach ache, are you really sick? Did you eat food that made you sick? Or are you experiencing fear and anxiety and medicating yourself over something that you should not be medicating yourself over? So this is what I mean when I say be in tune with your body and your emotions. Everything is not a medical emergency. Sometimes it's your body telling you that there's a need that is not met, that you need to take care of. So that's what I would add to what Jacinta said.
Thank you. And this is borrowed from Carol Chakwa and her team. How are you feeling? As in, as after all you've had, how are you feeling? And as I think we will, unless there's something we haven't touched, I think we've covered most of it. Unless Joanne, the two J's think there's something I haven't covered. If you have a question, the same way Modoni didn't raise her hand, but she asked a question.
Yes.
Saya, because you always have to put a religious angle here, Jacob and Rachel were enmeshed. What are you telling religious leaders instead of forcing us to, is it the Philippians verse or Ephesians verse for children of obey our parents? Are we still to obey our parents even if they're enmeshing us? And you and you can ask questions. Saya, go ahead.
So
and anything that came to your head.
The children obey your parents has the rider to it in the Lord. Honor your father and mother. Yeah, so it's not a blank check for parents to do as they wish with their children. The whole idea of child raising is reinforced fairly rigorously, I should say, in scripture, because the parents in turn are told two powerful things that they forget. One is raise a child in the way he should go, not in the way you think they should grow, not in the way that they will then become dependent on you, but no, raise up a child in the way he should go. And when he's older, he will not depart. And then secondly is parents do not provoke your children needlessly. Other versions say parents do not discourage your children needlessly. So the insistence of children honoring their parents, even at the risk of either physical harm or emotional harm, or in today's context, at the risk of enmeshment, is an abuse of scripture. It's not the proper use of scripture. Mm. The case you have cited of Jacob and his mother, Rebecca, is actually one of the biggest warnings against enmeshment, because not only did that relationship result in fraud, but from the day Jacob departed from home, he never saw his mother again while he was alive. So it speaks very strongly against this particular dynamic within the relationship. I like what is called the Lycian Creed. It says, because man is made in the image of God, in every culture, you'll find those things that are beautiful, and they speak of the heavenly and of the divine. But because all humanity is fallen, there's something within each of our cultures that speaks of being fallen. Some of it is depraved, some of it is evil, and some of it is just downright demonic. So with this, I think I like this balanced idea, because the whole issue of enmeshment is, it speaks not only to the fallenness of humanity, but it also speaks of the fallenness of all culture, because often one of the appeals done to keep enmeshed people within enmeshed things is you need to respect the culture, you need to honor the culture. But for people from, like, say, the Christian worldview, what the Bible gives is additional set of tools that do two things simultaneously. One is it critiques the culture, in the sense it questions the assumptions of culture and the practices of culture and the standpoint and the view of culture. And so if when applying it to the culture, it allows you to question what your parents are doing or requiring of you, or what your family system is requiring of you. Does it make sense? Is it cogent? Does it support what is best interest for you and for humanity. And then the second set of things that tools do is they point us to a method or set of principles within which we can safely meet the things we are trying to often meet in unhealthy or imbalanced ways. So I think in this regard, scripture, especially biblical scripture, is genius when properly understood and properly used in its ability to critique the culture, and then its ability to point to the set of principles and parameters within which we can safely meet certain needs. As we've discovered today, enmeshment is where my spiritual heart is a fallen response to legitimate human needs, like the need for company, for being together. The first human crisis actually in the Bible is not sin, it's aloneness. Genesis 2 speaks about God saying, man, it's not good for man to be alone. And this happens way before Genesis 3 when man becomes or falls into sin. So there's a legitimate need for addressing the question of aloneness. And pre-fall, when man is not fallen, scripture shows that God has provided tools and environments. He's provided family, he's provided work, he's provided companionship to be able to address that. But the same scripture also then tells us that in a fallen framework, man then resorts to methods that are unhealthy and actually at the end of the day counterproductive, because they end up detaching human beings from three important: one, human beings from themselves, from who they truly are, from what they should be. Then number two, it detaches human beings from community, connections that are healthy within wider community. And then it also detaches human beings from the transcendent, from God. And as an end result, all relationships in those contexts become very transactional. All sources of fulfillment become very hollow. They don't eventually work. And then at the end of the day, the individual is not fulfilled. So contrary to being a tool that reinforces dwelling in a meshed or abusive space, scripture, well understood, actually does quite the opposite. And any person insisting for a child to stay in the place they're being wounded or they're being undermined under the guise of scripture is a misuse of the authority of scripture. My thoughts.
Hallelujah. Wale wa hawajenda kanisa mmesikia sermonette. Okay, I think I am done. Joanne, Jacinta, Sarah, do you have anything else to add?
All I can say is, all said and done, enmeshment is a form of emotional abuse on a child. It is not closeness, it is not love, it is not any of the things the people who are enmeshed think it is. And it's not the thing that those of us looking from the outside in think it is. So I would encourage all of us not to create stories and assumptions about people's relationships and why people's relationships are not going the way we think they should be going, because we are outsiders of that relationship. We are not in the relationship. It doesn't matter whether it's how my mother relates with my sister or how my mother relates with my brother. I am not part of that relationship. I am an outsider in that relationship. So if my sister says she doesn't want to speak to my mother, regardless of what my mother comes to tell me, I am an outsider in what happened there. If your child does not want to speak to their father, it doesn't matter what you think about that. You are an outsider of that relationship. Every relationship between two people is unique, very unique and very individual. And we like meddling in other people's relationships and telling them how to relate to each other based on how we relate to the person. Remember, the most harmful person on planet Earth is somebody's loved one. And how you experience that horrible human is not the same way the family of that horrible human experience them. So there's duality and multiple truths can coexist. If nothing else, remember multiple truths can coexist. The most harmful person can also be the most loving person to another person.
True.
Ebu Rudia, the part for every relationship is different, because I feel like people expect relationship between a parent and all the children to be the same. Rudia, again.
So every child, when we are born into any family or to a person, we are unique. And from a Christian perspective, actually from a scientific perspective, there is nobody else who has the same fingerprints as Joanne Mwangi on this planet Earth with the 7 billion or 8 billion humans out there, which makes me unique as an individual, right? So how I relate to my sister, how I relate to Jacinta, how I relate to my brother, how I relate to my mother is very different from how anybody else relates to the same people. So I cannot expect my sister or my brother, we are 3 children, to relate exactly the same way with my parents. And then also, depending on birth order, depending on what is happening in the world, depending on what is happening to the person, each relationship happens differently. Today, I might go out here and I have a headache and I'm anxious and whatever, and some random person experiences me and they're like, that is the most awful human being I've ever met. And if they come and tell Jacinta, who is my friend, who has seen the good, bad, and ugly of me, that Joanne is a bitch and she's horrible, Jacinta will be like, that's not the Joanne I know. Or if you go tell my mom that I'm a horrible human, my mom will be like, no. This is why mothers of rapists and thieves and murderers are always like, my son is a good son. My daughter is a good human being. You will always see a parent or a person who is close to another person who has done a bad thing, defending them, because their experience with that person is very different from what we all see in the world, right? Because a rapist is not raping their mother, is not raping their sister, is not raping their close people. They are more than likely raping somebody out there or a child somewhere, right? A murderer is not murdering typically their family of origin. They're going to murder people out there. So their family of origin does not know them the way the rest of the world knows them. And I'm just using those very extreme examples. So it is for us to remember that even when we love our children and they go out there, the way people are experiencing them is very different. And as parents, if you have multiple children, the way your different children experience you is very different. So stop comparing the humans around you and expecting them to experience you the same way, but also stop expecting to experience all humans out there the same way, because each person is unique and a lot of things happen to a person that make them who they are. So having compassion for self and compassion for others is a big deal, big deal. Nihayo too. Someone, yes.
Jacinta?
Yes, just to add to what Joanne just said, is we need to show compassion and actually stop invalidating other people's experiences, right? And Joanne just alluded to that. The way children experience their parents is very, very different for every child. So I am one of the older children in my children of my mom. The way I experienced her, depending on where she was in life, the age she was in, how her marriage was going, the things that were happening, is very different from how my youngest sibling experienced her, because she was in a different stage in her life. So if I come and say how I experienced my mom or my dad was XXY, and then my sister invalidates that, how can you talk like that about my parents? That's not the parents I know. Of course they are not. Every child experiences parenting very differently. And so in families, we tend to not to invalidate our other family members' experiences of the same person. So we all do and can experience the same person very differently. And a lot of times in the work that we do, I specifically do and Joanne does, we see a lot of invalidation of that. The other thing I can add is, let's take the time to really understand the power of healthy boundaries. It is in having healthy boundaries that you actually end up co-creating the most healthy of relationships in every type of relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's parenting, whether it's family of origin relationships, and even work relationships. Healthy boundaries are a key ingredient in that.
Jacinta, weka ile flyer ya yenu na
Nani ameiweka hapo. Joanne has just put
it's actually a link. It's not
it's
a
a
flyer.
link.
There's no
It's a web page,
flyer.
yeah.
na simweke yo link tuone hapa vizuri.
Iko hapo. It's there. Joanne just put it in.
Just share, let me share. Unaniangushanga.
Where
Okay.
are you looking? I just put it in the chat. Do you want me
No,
to put
I'm
it on
just saying
Facebook?
for us for people to see how it looks here. So
Oh, you want me to share my screen and show you?
yes, the page.
Okay,
And
bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Give me just a second. And gentlemen, we are not trying to exclude you or anything like that, but
we just need to push Saya a bit more to just start it.
okay, so bear with me for just a second. I shall.
Okay, and if you have a question, just ask it. Otherwise, after Saya closes the meeting, we will have like 4 minutes of behind the offline questions if you have. Jacinta.
Yes, let me see if I can share, and you all let me know if you can see the page. So up until next Friday, it's only $29, and you can buy it. It will allow you to buy multiple enrollments if you want to gift this to your friends or family members. And this is really how to balance your career and your relationship to end the turmoil. Oftentimes, we feel like we have to choose one over the other, but it doesn't have to be that way. So Tabitha and I, we are going to be teaching you for a whole 6 days, actually, how to make sure that you're thriving in both your relationships, which is where I come in, and we are approaching that from a romantic relationship perspective, and how to thrive also in your career as well, without having to feel like you have to choose one over the other. So this is a page, elevatedafricanwoman.com, and this is happening August 4th through the 9th. So it's going to be me and Tabitha teaching.
And if ignore Jacinta over here, Tabitha is a whole vibe. She'll just make you feel like jumping into the screen.
Yes, she's absolutely fantastic at what she does. I can vouch for the fact that she will literally elevate your professional life, and not just. Even if you have a business, you're not like in employment, even if you are running a business, this is something you're going to find valuable, because she's teaching you how to not only negotiate, how to even price your goods and services, feel worthy enough of charging the right prices, how to negotiate, how to conflict manage, these things that happen in our professional lives that we have to have the right tools and know-how. And then I'll be teaching about the relationship with self, and how to show up as that woman who is able to co-create, because we are co-creators, co-create healthy romantic relationship with your husband, or bring back the romantic connection if that has fallen off a little bit. And so we have 6 days to teach that. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun class.
Thank you. Saa tufungie kituo, Joanne, as usual, and Jacinta, put your normal pages over there. Saa funga kituo.
So thank you everyone for being here, and not being enmeshed with us, but coming to learn how to get ourselves out of the mesh. Thank you for our panelists for making it course that you're putting out. I trust it'll be a blessing to others. So just imagine the pain of continuing in enmeshment. Think of the possibility has been made in human beings who've been fully set free, and the gift of individuality has been respected. Individuality is such a big thing. Countries have fought over it, wars have been fought over it, so that people can have individual liberties. And generally, countries that have had that individual liberty have done way better. I think what's true with countries is true with the individual. And so, whereas in your loneliness or twisted way, you believe keeping that child under your wings or keeping your family name as being more important than the individual's growing seems to be most important, wouldn't you just give it a chance? Think about the story of, we've quoted, of Jacob and his mother. They imagined in their enmeshment that what they were putting together or stitching together would result in both of them being elevated. Remember, Jacob steals his brother's birthright when he is 40. So he's a man at 40 listening to his mother at that point. And Jacob will come back home at 60, and it'll have taken him 20 years for all of that work to be undone. Meanwhile, by that time, Jacob will have 4 wives he didn't really need. Jacob will have a ton of fears that he really never needed to go through. And Jacob would have to re-enter the promised land and find his mother dead and himself coming back limping. So enmeshment isn't worth what it appears to be. At the end of the day, we can be able to heal. And I'm happy that the tools are there. So thank you again. And please remember to subscribe to our pages on Facebook. It's Authentic Dialogues. And we have a YouTube page by the same name, Authentic Dialogues, and a sister page called Sarah Jackson on YouTube. On Instagram and on TikTok, you can keep in touch with us through one Sarah Jackson. This is our last thing in July.
We have one more with the same team at the end of July on narcissism.
Okay, we have narcissism. Okay, I misread my calendar. So we have narcissism last weekend of July. Big word thrown around also. We need to unpack the English from the hype and be able to get the psychology basis of it and heal from the same. Meanwhile, until then, keep the conversation going and remember to share ideas, remember to share speakers, remember to share topics that you'd like to address or for people to address, and we'll be happy. After this, we'll have our off live stream session. We call it Behind the Tent. So for those who'll be watching, that's what you miss for not being present on the live show. Until next time, let's keep having these authentic dialogues. Thank you.
Thank